think I'll just get started because again, we unfortunately are pressed for time and there's so much exciting stuff to do today. But hopefully people, I see Kathy's just trickled in. That's great. I think others will join. And
do you want me to run down and grab Brenda, or I can
enjoy your food.
Yeah,
you know, she'll come.
Okay. No?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a great point.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, much to my dismay, it's just me today. Marissa and Lori are committed to their board meeting for We See Hope today, which was a scheduling conflict we hadn't anticipated. So apologies that this isn't really co-led by patients, but I feel like we're doing it together anyways. It's very organic and not that structured. So sorry about that.
I'm a patient.
You are, that's right, yes, and we have other Mackenzie, other patients here too. So we're all doing it together is what I'm going to tell myself. I see we have a new person in our group who wasn't with us yesterday. Should we just do a really quick round of introductions so everyone knows each other? Would that be okay? Anyone want to nod or not nod? Will not. Okay, I'll start. My name is Caitlin Flagg. I manage the retinoblastoma research program at Sick Kids and helped co-create CRAB back in 2015 with Dr. Damaris. And with respect to the work we're doing today on the Psychosocial Needs Assessment project, I helped kind of set the priorities that established that psychosocial needs was a priority in Canada and helping with the working group that's trying to get this project funded and led the preliminary project as well. Maybe we'll go around the in-person group first. Is that okay? Ella, would you mind going?
Yep. My name is Ella Bowles, and I presented just not very long ago. So I had bilateral retinoblastoma and have been involved in various aspects of. Come on in.
Am I in the right place?
Various kind of retinoblastoma research projects and engaged patient work, over the last 20 years or so.
Thanks so much, Ella. Mackenzie.
My name is Mackenzie Devlin. I'm a parent of a child who has bilateral retinoblastoma and is in active treatment at Sick Kids. And I'll also just plug that I'm a recent PAC member of the RFF.
Yeah. Plug away. That's great. Brenda, would you please introduce yourself? We have a new person online, so just do quick introductions.
I started working in retinoblastoma in 1973 when I was a resident because I had one patient and had to present that to the city. And that hooked me on the science and the patient care and all the outcomes and everything that we're talking about here. And it's so exciting to be here where this CRAB meeting is just spectacular, covering everything. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Alyssa?
Hello, my name is Alyssa. I'm a research assistant here at Sick Kids, and I work with the biobank team.
Great. Maybe we'll go with Kathy. Would you go next, please, if you don't mind?
Yes, I'm Kathy Johnson. Brenda diagnosed my daughter almost 40 years ago with bilateral retinoblastoma. And then recently she worked with her on CRAB. So we have all kinds of different experiences going over the past 4 decades.
Thank you, Kathy. And is it Juan? Would you kindly introduce yourself if you don't mind?
Yes, hello. I'm Juan Lopez from Chile. I'm a pediatric ophthalmologist, and I was trained at Sick Kids with Dr. Gali 20 years ago almost. And I'm very interested in hearing the experience you are going to share.
Thank you for being here. That's excellent. And can the Halifax cohort introduce themselves, please?
Hi. Seeing as I'm next to the microphones and that sort of thing, and I'm working the IT, I suppose I'll go first. I'm Bruce Crooks. I'm a pediatric hematologist and oncologist, and I came to Canada in 2002 with an interest in retinoblastoma from when I was a resident, and I've perpetuated that interest, and I help to care for the kids who need diagnosis, treatment, and follow up here in Halifax.
Thanks, Bruce.
Hi everyone, I'm Kim. I'm a retinoblastoma survivor, and I was actually treated by Brenda Gali.
Hi, I'm Jose. I'm Kim's wife. I'm also a social worker and a mental health counselor.
Hi, everyone. My name's Mari. I do research here at the IWK. And this is my first introduction to crab, and I'm learning a lot, so thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Moj. I am a grad student here at Dalhousie studying clinical vision science. In terms of crab, I've been in and out of crab and the Damaris lab for second half of my undergrad. And for this project, I worked on the recruitment, and I just started to dip my toes into the data analysis before I had to come all the way out here and start the East Coast chapter of crab. So I'm very excited to be talking about this today.
Thanks, everybody. Elisa just joined us. Would you mind introducing yourself? Does it count?
Oh, sorry.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elisa Ulster, and I'm the social worker with the retinoblastoma team at Sick Kids, and I've been on the team for many, many years.
Okay, we're having some minor technical difficulties here in Toronto. Are you able to see my slides, those that are not here? Yeah, we're just not seeing you all very well, but the AV person will, I'm sure, be by to help me in just a second. I'll carry on in spite of that if that's okay, because we're still a bit pressed for time. So I'm going to give a quick background. Many of you were here in our first part one of the workshop yesterday, but I'm going to give another background, and then we're going to do some co-creation together, and then prepare for the group discussion that will happen when we all get back together with the other groups. Yes, what's wrong?
I went to go look for the audiovisual, but
Yeah,
we can maybe try to like leave and rejoin. I don't
sure.
know.
They won't hear us that way. Let's just leave it for now, because I think they're hearing us and seeing us, and we're
It's
seeing
just
these
us?
two. So it's just
Okay.
this. I think it's okay.
We're just not seeing them.
But we can still see them on this screen-ish, kind of. Oh, let's see if Steve might come up with this better fix, if that's okay. I messaged him.
Oh,
so
okay.
I think
Sure,
yeah,
sure.
thank you. Okay, sorry about that. So let's go. Okay, quick background. Sorry, it's repetitive for some that were here yesterday, but nonetheless, as we know, our research here in Canada has consistently demonstrated that our retinoblastoma community wants more psychosocial support. And I'm just gonna minimize this for a second. And this came through in some very intentional ways, like we did some focus groups to ask patient families what mattered to them, and so it, the need for psychosocial support came out in that way, but also in really unexpected ways. Like we did some focus groups asking about needs and understanding of genetic testing information, and interestingly, somehow it took a left turn and started talking about psychosocial support. So since I joined the team in 2015, almost every study I did, no matter the purpose of the study, psychosocial support kept coming out as a really important topic and theme. And so then in 2017, when we determined the top 10 research priorities for retinoblastoma in Canada, it was not surprising that priority 3 was how to improve psychosocial support for everybody affected by retinoblastoma. So this is important to our community for sure. We tried since 2017 as a CRAB group to co-create a grant. We did co-create a grant rather, that would try and create an intervention to improve psychosocial support services for retinoblastoma patients and families. And that intervention study concept would not be funded. We submitted it, I think, 5 or more times, and we just failed at having it funded. And one of the criticisms, understandably, was we didn't have the best empirical evidence in Canada that there was a need. We knew it was a research priority, but we couldn't actually hang that on a study that shows there's a well-established need. And so we decided to do a very small informal effort to try and establish that need, which was launched in 2022, was an online survey, and the aims of the survey are on the screen now. So we were trying to determine supportive care needs and distress of survivors and patients and parents, and uncover which needs are met and unmet, essentially. Now, we looked at these results yesterday. They're very preliminary results. I don't have the best statistics to back them up just yet, but that will come soon. But just to go through them at very high level, when we looked at distress among the Canadian participants that filled this out, parents and survivors both had some levels, at least half or more of the respondents shared with us that they had clinically relevant distress using the NCCN distress thermometer. So our preliminary study results say there is some distress in this population that is clinically relevant. The distress thermometer also asks people to tell us about problems they're having, which help us understand the distress more. And there's different categories of problems. And I think all we need to take away from this slide is that parents and survivors had just problems, they reported problems at least, that kind of fell into all of the categories. There wasn't one type of problem category that was only reported on by these respondents. There was physical problems, practical, emotional, social, and even some spiritual or religious problems that were shared with us. In terms of access and need for information, parents and survivors disclosed to us they had some unmet information needs, and most commonly that was related to long-term screening for second cancers. And in terms of access and need for services, again, there was unmet needs for services in both groups, and the needs that were disclosed differed. Parents were talking about the need for family counseling and vision loss rehabilitation, and survivors, it was back to some of the information about follow-up and continuity of care. So yesterday we had a really great exercise where we tried to start doing some very early analyses of those results. And I invite anyone who's interested to do a more robust analysis to let me know, and you'll be welcome to be part of that. And we'll have a student helping do some of the statistics, and we can look at them and interpret those together as we go into the summertime. But today what I was hoping we could talk about, if everyone's open to this, is this new proposed study that we have submitted. We got really good feedback from the first submission, and so we resubmitted it and are hopeful it will be funded. And I'm sharing with you now the aims of the new proposed study. So instead of jumping to the intervention, what we're proposing is just to take this survey we did in Canada that was very rudimentary and had a small sample size, and we want to launch it internationally. And we want to offer anyone with any rare pediatric eye cancer, including RB patients and families, to do the survey. And it's very similar to what you saw I presented from our preliminary results. We're trying to determine distress, psychosocial information, and service needs. And then the second aim is to uncover some perspective about those needs. And that's really what I was hoping we could talk about today. And the way we'll uncover these perspectives about these needs is through focus groups. So I just want to, again, level the playing field so we're all on the same page. So focus groups, for those that don't know, they're used by researchers to collect data about knowledge, attitude, or experiences. And it's done by speaking with a group of research subjects. And researchers use this to answer a research question. So it is a form of research. It's called qualitative research. And focus group guides are how they guide how the focus group is conducted. And so they're generally a list of questions that a facilitator would use to lead that discussion. So it has some kind of standard approach, because there's usually multiple focus groups on different days that happen. And here's just 4 key things for us that are newer to focus groups that we should keep in mind. So the focus group guide should have questions that are open-ended, because you're trying to stimulate conversation. They should avoid dichotomous questions. So we don't want yes, no, right, wrong, black, white. We want more, again, open-ended questions. The questions are intended to be engaging. So they should encourage people to do reflection or think back, have rating scales, things like that. And they really should be focused on actual questions. So they should have purpose and categories within the focus group guide, which I'll speak to now. So what we thought we'd do today, if people are open to this, is try and co-create some categories that we could use when the study is launched, that would be in the focus group guide. So generally focus group guide has categories, and then each category will have a list of these type of open-ended style questions that we would ask. And I thought today I would love to even get to some questions. I've left time for that if time permits, but I thought as a jumping off point, we could take a look again at the aim, which is on the screen, of this aim of the study that we're trying to develop together. And we could think of categories of questions we might ask that would address that aim. So the aim, once again, is to uncover perspectives about psychosocial information and service needs, and also how to address those needs. So that's what we're trying to get out of these focus groups. So we want to know, again, perspectives from patients and caregivers about psychosocial information and service needs and how to address them. On the right side of the screen, you'll see some categories that were in the grant. They were kind of thrown in there last minute so that we showed we had an idea, but I think we can do better today. So these are the categories that we put out there in the grant. We said we might have a question about experience of well-being and distress, about psychosocial needs, about experience accessing and using information and services, and then some preferences about components of services. It's not uncommon to have just very high level categories that tie right back to your aims, but I think it's useful. I just want to brainstorm together, how do you think the focus group should be conducted and how should we categorize our questions. So my thought was when I planned this out, we would think of categories and then we can kind of co-create some questions in those categories. But if it'd be easier to just start throwing out questions you think we need to ask in the focus groups, we can do that too, and then we can categorize them after. It's kind of whatever way you want to approach the problem. Do you have any preferences?
In the short term, it's easier to just think of the
Question, I think it might be, yeah, that's true.
Or otherwise, we're pausing, where does my question belong?
Yeah, so we can start with we can kind of go bottom up and think of all the questions and then try and organize them later. Or we can think of categories and then the questions that will fall there. Any strong opinions? Yeah, Ella.
So I just have a question. These questions then relate to the outcomes of the survey that we were analyzing yesterday?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the survey we did yesterday was preliminary. It will hopefully help this study we're talking about today get funded.
Yeah.
The study we're going to do, once it's funded, we'll have two parts. We'll have a quantitative component and a qualitative component. So we'll repeat that survey we did and hopefully have money to actually incentivize people to do it. So we'll have much greater power and so it will enhance the preliminary results. And then there'll be these qualitative findings. We will do the quantitative analysis first, and that will help guide the focus groups.
Yeah.
But we also will likely ask questions that fall out of scope of what the quantitative results tell us. So this will not be the final focus group guide. That is true. The guide will be guided by the questionnaire results that we get. But
okay, so to just to like put something out there and just to like be extremely vulnerable in this space. So speaking to the psychosocial needs, which I actually think is like a good category.
Yeah.
Would a question be something along the, okay, so I'll talk about the need and then maybe we derive the question from the need. And maybe this isn't the right place for this. Maybe the right place is with the Canadian National Institute for the Blind and support that they provide. But anyways, for example, for the psychosocial needs, I think people with a visible difference in their face and as a result of retinoblastoma, support, or do people need support navigating that in a social context at different stages of life? So, navigating it as a child is different from navigating it as a teenager, is different from navigating it at a later stage in adulthood. So that was probably really convoluted. Hopefully you could track my thoughts. But
almost age specific.
Yeah.
Age stage.
Yeah, /stage specific. Support with social.
Yeah, I guess social, yeah, like, just like this support in social settings. And then the corollary to that, and I'm speaking to these things because this is directly my experience, and the things that I have, navigated mostly on my own, but also through support, I suppose, in some way through the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. But the other piece is, so the visual component and then the actual impact of the disability and what that impacts in terms of what, there we go, Steve. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there.
The actual impact of the disability and how that changes your access to the world. Which can be really meaningful, and have, anyway, so
Those are great
would be
questions.
things. Yeah.
So you're talking, we're looking at social supports and how those might be contextualized based on someone's age and stage, right? Is that the first part of it? And the second is how
I
it
think so.
impacts.
I think we could extend that to the parent side of the questionnaire as well, because depending whether your child has just been diagnosed, whether they're undergoing treatment or as they grow up, parents have there's different impacts on parents during those different stages of life as well, and different kinds of distress as a result. It depends where you live, if you're close to a treatment center or not, depending what country you're in, depending whether you have family support systems nearby, non-existent, all different things like that.
Oh, okay, I'm already unmuted?
Yes, you're unmuted. You can ask away, Jose.
Okay. To follow up on impact of disability and how that impacts your access to the world, I think maybe a good open-ended question could be, what tools have you developed as a child, as a teenager, as an adult to deal with the adversity? And that's the first question, and what tools do you need to deal with the adversity today? Excellent. Yeah. Also, it would be interesting to explore the terminology, are RB survivors as well as parents of RB survivors' family, are they able to identify that it is trauma? It's trauma what they went through, and that they're most certainly living with PTSD. So I'm thinking, I don't know how to ask it in a question, open-ended question, but how would you define trauma? How would you define PTSD?
Yeah, I think we don't want, I really like what you're asking. I like how open-ended these questions you're suggesting are. I think our English search result.
Caitlin, you seem to be muted.
Thanks so much, Bruce. Is it working now?
I do this all the time.
Okay. Yeah, I think the question you suggested about how would you define trauma, PTSD, even distress, which is one of the themes of this study. That's an interesting question to ask. And I think we don't want to prejudge and that everyone will say they have those experiences, but maybe do those definitions relate to your RB experience might be something to ask, because some might share that it is distressing and others, as we've heard, don't recall any of it and therefore did not find it distressing. Brenda?
There's something that has.
Carry on again.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. The thing is even as an infant, when something like that happens to your body, even though we don't recall the specific events, it can still create something inside. The body, maybe the mind does not specifically remember, but the body can remember. And there are certain things that maybe an adult today, maybe the adult is anxious, maybe the adult is depressed. And because they don't have that terminology of oh, I'm not traumatized because I don't even remember the events, I think it's important to be able to identify, well, trauma is very complex to describe. And just because we don't remember what happened to our bodies does not mean that it does not have an impact. And maybe we don't even have the terminology or the knowledge to know that, holy shoot, I think this is PTSD related from something that happened as an infant.
There is actually there's data coming forward from people who study pain and chronic pain about the impact of pain during infancy, particularly during the neonatal period and that sort of thing, on how that influences your perspectives of pain and how you handle it later on. And people that have experienced significant painful experiences with even in infancy, it really modifies the way that you actually respond to pain in the future, not only as a physical thing, but also as a psychological and a trauma thing. So that's very real. Yeah.
So maybe that's part of what we want. What I'm hearing is asking people, because definitely have had pushback from people before with this notion of trauma. Like some people are very adverse to being labeled as having had trauma, but maybe part of it is saying, irrespective of how we label it, how do you think your childhood experience shaped you? Like maybe there's atypical ways or ways that aren't as. What do you think, Brenda and Alyssa? This is your.
Yeah, I mean, again, as someone with not lived experience, but,
Yeah.
Professional experience, I've definitely heard kind of both sides.
Yeah.
I guess what my concern would be is not kind of implying that everyone is necessarily would labeled as PTSD, for example. Some people would say that. I guess what I would be wondering about, like, issues like, for example, level of anxiety or sleep disturbances or some of these other things, the feeling unwell, like some of those kind of things to maybe get at a little bit of that. Like overall health, depression, I don't know what. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, like, on a day-to-day basis, how is that individual functioning, right? From mental health and from a physical health perspective.
Almost like those are proxies for some of their childhood experiences, perhaps, or related to.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Fran.
It's a bit not quite following Caitlin's instructions, but but a topic that has not come up the whole week, the whole 2 days, is when a child or a person close to you dies of retinoblastoma or a different cancer. That's a profound trauma that could have how does the patient themselves or the person who experiences this in their close friends or family move forward? Maybe in this survey, you would kind of target that to ask
Absolutely.
people for their input on how that affected them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I go again?
Yeah, of course.
Again, I'm not sure how to articulate this, so I might ramble a little bit, but the other piece that I wonder if we can ask a question about is something that I feel as though several of us, patients or survivors, have touched on, presenters or commenters, and that is like a resistance to addressing the psychosocial needs. And like this has been written about. Ryan Knighton, a blind writer who is also an instructor at a college university, he wrote a really excellent book about this and his experience going blind from retinitis pigmentosa. But it's like confronting something that is the same, and talking about it in community or there's like, anyways, like maybe like exploring what that resistance is, I don't know if it's important or not, but anyway, it's one thought. I guess in terms of understanding what the challenges are, I see that as being important.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Yeah.
I have some questions, Caitlin.
Yeah.
These are all really phenomenal. I'm gonna take it back right to basics. What services are you aware of? Like, what services are you aware of before, like maybe pre or post diagnosis, if that's helpful? Where do you get most of your information about retinoblastoma, or where did you get most of your information about retinoblastoma? Kind of after the diagnosis, I guess. And then this last one that I have here is, how do you think your access or lack thereof to services, information, or psychosocial needs has impacted your experience?
Yeah, wow. Who is that?
Moj.
Hi.
Those are great questions. She's been part of this project from the very early days.
Yeah.
I think that's key too, not just what you know, but are you
Yeah.
accessing any services, any
Yeah.
supports?
Exactly, and where are those and what are they, so that, yeah,
And were they helpful?
totally,
Were they supportive?
That's good. Were they helpful? Like just because someone knows about the service or uses it doesn't
Exactly.
necessarily mean
Say
it's
no,
helpful.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
The other thing too, I want something specifically asking about self-esteem.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. How do you ask it?
Self-esteem, like, how do you feel about yourself? How do you think others perceive you? I think,
We're just gonna do this. Sorry, but
What's the matter?
Kim has another question as well here.
Great.
Hi, I would say, I would ask, how do you talk about retinoblastoma
Yes, absolutely.
It's a great question.
to like different contexts, like health professionals, family, friends, strangers? And maybe a sub question to that is, would you feel comfortable sharing?
I also have additional questions on that, which comes to my interest in patients actually having access to their own information. And what is, as I say, what's the impact on you of not actually having or actually being in possession of your own medical information?
Yes.
Also understanding what the treatments that you went through have done to you as well. And then it's so knowing, also the other part is knowing what you need to look after yourself in the future, given your risks of late effects and potential sort of problems like second malignancies, et cetera, So it's what does that impact of knowledge lack impact on you?
so there's like, gaps in knowledge, right?
Yeah.
All right.
No, it's great, I mean,
Yeah,
you know, more
okay.
questions and you having to ferociously type is.
Well, these are excellent questions. I really appreciate everyone.
Yeah. So good.
We haven't heard from Juan at all. If you're still there, do you have any thoughts on this? I'm putting you on the spot, which is not really kind. I hope you don't mind.
No, I think it's very interesting to listen to all of these comments. What I facing now is my patients are getting older, and they are actually retinoblastoma survivors facing new challenges in their lives, like, for example, getting married. And it's very important to know how they lack information about their future or their future families, as we don't actually have access to genetic study in Chile. We're trying to, and the patients ask you about where to get information or to get available information worldwide to know where maybe to get more precise information about their future in related to their reproductive future as a couple. And that's something I haven't faced before. But now that, as I said, my patients are getting older and are retinoblastoma survivors, they are asking me more frequently, more than to the oncologist. They ask the ophthalmologist about that kind of topics that I'm not used to talk with them about.
Because you're the point of care. It's the same in Canada, I would say.
Mhm.
Yeah. Your access to care.
That's really useful.
you were saying about like career planning or
Yeah, that's a good one, yeah.
education.
These are obviously at the final draft, so just ignore the grammatical errors and the overlap, and we can rank and reword and do all that fun stuff together, whoever wants to later. This is just brainstorming right now, so don't judge me.
No judgment.
On that note, so I like noticed between the two surveys, on the ones with the parents, it asks multiple questions when it comes to like genetic counseling as a need, but it doesn't say that on the survivor one. It lists adoption, it lists infertility, but it doesn't say, do you have access to a genetic counselor? Do you want to know more about that? Like there's, the genetic isn't even a word on this one, which I think is interesting because I guess it's implied that like the parents or doctors or whoever will give that information. But I know just from like the cancer communities, there's a lot of parents who haven't even told their children that there is a genetic component. Or like if new research down the line shows that maybe a new thing comes up, like maybe a survivor who's an adult wants to know more about that as we get older.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to review why that would be, or if it was an oversight. It may have been prejudged that the patients would be in Canada have had access to that, but that's not true, especially of all patients, if they were immigrants, if they were older. So if that was omitted, it may have been an error. I have to look at that. But it's a great point that that service need is relevant to both types of respondents. That's important. We have been talking a lot about, I would maybe say that it seems the lion's share of these questions are really geared towards the survivor, older parent, patient maybe. Like, is there any questions we haven't thought of yet that would be relevant to parents of like more newly diagnosed children in terms of their information and service needs? Because we kind of have two different cohorts. That as well. So right now, because the focus groups will only be parents as answering on behalf of their children, we may be able to do a youth or an AYA focus group, but right now the plan was to do parents of children that are not able to consent for themselves yet, and then survivors or patients that are at an age where they could consent to be in focus groups. So I'm just thinking of that more newly, like freshly diagnosed experience. Is there any psychosocial type questions we could ask?
I know we hear from parents, how do they support their child through the treatment journey? How do they support their mental health? And just parenting a child who has medical needs.
I think like childcare is a big piece too. Like I know that's something we faced because we were in treatment. We were both full-time working. We couldn't put our child in conventional daycare where they get a disease like every other day. But like we also couldn't afford to have like a full-time live-in nanny because then one of us would just like not work. So that was like a challenging piece, and there was like no resources out there. Like I've seen it for the reverse where maybe you're an adult who has cancer. There are people who will come into your house and watch your children at an affordable cost so you can go to your appointments and stuff.
Yes, yeah.
But for parents, I was like, I'm gonna have to quit my job. Like that was on the table at one point, which was like really concerning.
Yeah.
Another piece, I think, just in light of Ella's presentation today, is having access to her medical data. Like I know recently my husband's been saying like, how do we get the images from sick kids? Like I want to have those images. I'm curious and want to have access to them, but nobody like shows you how you go about doing that. So
And then you have to go through medical records and pay some of the time,
Yeah.
which is atrocious.
Yeah.
Your own
Yeah.
record.
And good luck.
Your own
You might have
records.
physicians who say, oh yeah, you just have to ask this person for your medical record. You ask for your medical
And it doesn't
record
happen.
and you get something that's incomprehensible and not useful.
Yeah.
But the pick will be here soon.
Yeah.
As long as we can get funding.
Another plug.
Yeah.
Okay, that's so barriers that parents of newly diagnosed children face, including childcare, access to data. Those are important questions to ask because that will affect both the child and the parents' psychosocial. And the other thing that always interests me is obviously siblings and all of the psychosocial aspects that are tied into that, but also the parents. Like how do you think your psychosocial experience affects your child's too, right? Because they're so interconnected, right? If I'm a mom having a hard time, that will potentially be felt by my child, and conversely as well.
Yeah. There's a word that hasn't come up here yet. That's guilt.
Oh,
You
yeah.
could look at it from every point of view.
I actually said that to Helen today in the middle of the patient panel, so I was like, we need to look at this more because it really came through. Yeah.
Totally. Well, and even, I think, my challenge and my personal challenge in talking about the psychosocial stuff, I have a great life. I have a great career. I have a great, and yet there is a challenge, and you know, there's a challenge that, you know, anyway, it's like, you know, minor in the scheme of things, you know, so.
But then on the positive side of that, how did I survive and become as good as I'm doing in all these things despite these challenges?
Resilience.
The positive side.
Yeah, yeah.
And the guilt of a survivor, I don't know if you said this, but one thing that I was wondering about was in your talk, you were talking about how it was really experienced by your parents and less so by you, and how you have this, so part of you wondered, did survivors ever feel guilt in that way, that like they didn't face those psychosocial hardships, but their parents did? I don't know, but it
I have never.
Not that I think we should, but I was like, I wonder if Bella's going with this earlier. Good, I'm glad you said.
It's not something that I have gotten as a vibe from other retinoblastoma patients either. I don't know if that's, maybe it's just different because it's a childhood thing, like, and it's so early in childhood, but I don't know. And I probably shouldn't speak for other people, but it's never crossed my mind.
Just put that there.
Let's throw it again. I don't know if other people would feel this way, but I wondered also about stigma. Parents feeling that there's just
That
a
is
stigma of having a
100%.
child.
That is 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially with prosthetics. Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you have any kind of visual difference, you know. My mom spends a lot of time, and I spend a lot of energy looking normal, you know, trying to look like I'm sighted. And my mom spends a lot of energy making me be able to do that.
Okay, so stigma of visual difference, also in the stigma of psychosocial.
Yeah, or stigma of just, for example, like, you know, other people knowing, for example, that their child has cancer.
Yeah.
That they're dealing with cancer in their family.
Yeah. And that you have a history of cancer, there's a whole thing about that. And with my siblings, when we went through the whole genetic testing phase, like, my siblings who had partners and wanted to have kids, they like didn't tell their kids that they could potentially have the mutation, and like now they know that they don't, it's all good, but like it's a whole thing. Yeah.
Maybe not just stigma, but fear of stigma, right?
Yeah.
Great. Anything from people that aren't, I feel like Trona's doing lots of talking. How do you
Visual differences.
Talking about stigma, sorry, it's Bruce in Halifax. Talking about stigma, you also have cultural differences as well. And one of the things that we touched on yesterday a little bit in our group was certainly from in high income countries, retinoblastoma is not usually a fatal disease. In low and middle income countries, because of the stage of the disease, difficulty of access to treatments, et cetera, that is not often the case. But also there is treatment abandonment for a variety of reasons as well. And how does that impact? And as I say, I don't know quite what questions to ask or anything like that, but there's the issue of treatment abandonment simply because you have a child that's now damaged. You have treatment abandonment because you cannot afford treatments, you cannot afford to travel, you cannot afford medications, you cannot afford whether or not that's too stressful on the rest of the family, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole variety of cultural differences depending on sort of your country of origin, your race, your et cetera, religious, spiritual, et cetera. So there's a whole dimensions of stuff that are outside this as well that we sometimes don't realize are there because we're in Canada and we have access to all this high-tech medical care, et cetera. And although we have, as I say, the treatments themselves are paid for, then a lot of the rest of the sort of the financial isn't. But if you're somewhere else, then even the medical care isn't paid for. So again, that's another dimension to think of for psychosocial stress and distress.
There's a whole nother aspect of that, or the flip of that is susceptibility to marketing from the high income world, that they can cure your child and you destroy your whole life and your family and you sell everything. And then you go home and your child dies. That's a huge stressor, and those people aren't counted. They aren't at this meeting.
And we call that, what's health tourism?
Marketing,
What is
marketing eye salvage over life.
That's happened.
It happens all the time.
Really?
And then I could give you a whole story in the last month.
Anyone else?
When the kid could have been cured by simple enucleation at home, the family go on.
Kathy or anybody else that's not with us physically have anything? What are we missing here?
I do think, so within Canada, you know, I think what Bruce is saying, Bruce said about international and different
Yeah, even
international
locally.
people. But even within Canada, like the access to care within Indigenous nations and northern communities and stuff like that, and an understanding of Western medicine and kind of the interplay with traditional medical practices and stuff, I think there's really a lot that's not understood there, not with all nations, less so with nations in the south, I think, but at least with northern nations.
Even adding on to that, even just access to care or like different access across Canada, like over here in our eastern provinces versus you know, like going to major cities and like transportation costs and things like that.
Yeah.
I have 2 more questions too, but I'll give you, Caitlin, some time to type those.
Don't worry, we're recording this, so when I just do a terrible job, I'll listen to the recording again too.
I will say too, so these are 2 things from my experience collecting data for the journey maps and also for our psychosocial study. So 2 things, the kind of the reverse of the high income, there was one family who got their treatment elsewhere in a Scandinavian country, and actually their concern was that because the treatment was so good over there that they had live-in childcare, their kind of treatment was paid for. Everything was kind of a lot quote unquote better over there, that when they came to Canada for their follow-up, they were actually concerned about like follow-up care and the decrease in quality from where they were getting their care previously. So I don't know if there would be like a question about that, but I think like kind of two sides of the coin, where in some high income countries, or maybe it's like things that we can look to, or like, for example, those people, we could ask them like, what are the things in your care that were so great? How could we maybe implement that in Canada? Or like, how can we bring back, or what were the best things that you experienced in your care that we could bring back to Canada? Maybe that would, you know, improve our services here. And then the sorry, give me one second. Oh, the other one that came up during the journey maps was that parents, or because for tailoring this specifically to parents, they wanted to know about kind of like vision, like how can I get information about like vision progression? What is my child's vision going to look like? What is my child's life going to look like with the level of vision that they have, and what supports are available for them if they do turn into a low vision patient? What are the supports for them in school? What are the supports for them as they age? Will my child be able to drive? Things like that. So just kind of general like vision progression, I would say, and like resources for that, both for the parents and for the child as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, because again, just reminding, like that, those are very useful, Moj, thank you. I think that as with all focus groups, we're gonna have to find a way of asking these questions in a way that's non-biasing.
Yes.
So your question about like what's the best and worst elements of your care are really important to ask and set that type of way. And our focus groups are gonna have to be context dependent. So assume we do lots of focus groups, we'll have to do some for different, whether it's within our nation, different regions, or certainly internationally. But yeah, so you're asking about vision progression and what support could be available if a child's vision was to deteriorate. But maybe more broadly, if we're just looking at broadly about information services, I think you're getting at an interesting point, which is not just what, like maybe people want to know what their what information services could become available to them in the future. You know what I mean? Like not just asking questions now, like what are your needs that are met, unmet, but maybe an unmet need is just knowing future information services that, you know, might become relevant depending on the progression or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and being able to like, I don't want to say like expectation manage, but like being able to tell their child or the parents themselves to know like, will my child be able to drive? If they can drive, what are the supports that are available to them at that time that happens? Or who can I come back to when it's the time for that to get those supports?
Yeah, I think that's common, and also like family planning, like, well, when I go to have children, what are my options going to be? Or when I go to university, like it's all those things, people want to know.
Yeah.
I had a question. Go ahead, Mary. I have another, I guess, question or thought, and it's kind of along these lines, but it's that whole idea of like transitioning in care, so either from like a different health system or even just from a pediatric center and then moving to adulthood, and kind of like what do you need to make those transitions through the healthcare system? Even in the Maritimes, like a lot of people live rurally and then they come to Halifax, but then they go back and they might see a GP. So kind of like what kind of needs and supports would people need to make those transitions?
That's a great question. What, now, I don't know if we talk, I wonder, I'm just looking at our job today. So we've come up with a very long list of potential questions. I will certainly, with Alyssa's help, listen to the recording and try and flesh this out into longer list of questions. I'm wondering if it would be useful to talk for a second about, are there any questions we could think about, like we've asked you, a lot of these questions help us elucidate what people's needs are for information and services. The other part of this was how to address them. So we've asked, what are the best and worst elements of your care? What are your fears? Is there any questions aside from just plainly asking how can we address them? Is there any other ways we could ascertain that? Like if so, we do a focus group and we get a big long list of needs that are probably some met and some unmet. How can we ask questions to unpack patients' desires for addressing their needs? Because this is kind of looking forward to developing an intervention. So we do this focus group, this quantitative study, we establish a need. We're hoping in these focus groups we can get a little bit more information about how people would want those needs to be addressed. Would it be an intervention? Would it be funding? Like I don't know, type of intervention too.
It might be a number of different things, right?
Exactly.
Like it could be like, for example, a group.
Exactly.
Survivors or a group of parents.
And we always thought intervention would be multifaceted, but I'm just wondering how could we elucidate that from our focus group attendees in terms of people probably have some conceived, it's like I know people do. I know survivors have told me I really want a community or like, so yeah, how do we ask like,
I wonder if you could ask even, I mean, like, these will need to be tweaked, but
Yeah.
I wonder if you could ask even just like almost a multiple choice question within other options. So, would, or even yes, no, other. So like, would an adult family support network be helpful? Yes, no, other, or something like that. I know they're forced answer questions, and so you get sort of different outcomes from them, but as a starting point anyways, and maybe the same thing for so one for parents, one for survivors or patients. Would funding be helpful for you? Or you could say like, which of the following might be helpful to address your needs, and then include all of these as options, and then an other or something like that. Or allow them to select multiple. And probably everybody will say everything, but maybe you'll get something that's meaningful out of it. I don't know.
Similar to that point, or like kind of following that, short of basically just asking people what they would want, kind of like asking maybe how, for example, if it was like for information needs, like how would you like to receive this information, or who would you like to receive this information from? Kind of be more specific with the addressing portion, how to address them.
Like what format you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, like what format, from your doctor, from your genetic counselor, from a booklet in the waiting room, like how do you want to receive that information? Or maybe like what would what would be the most, not trustworthy, but like actionable info, like how would, in what way would you receive the information that it would be like helpful to you and that you would apply it in your life and not just like, stick it up on the fridge type thing? Like how can you receive like actionable and useful information? And then the second one I had here was what would an ideal care plan, or like what would ideal care look like for you? Or what would it involve, like what aspects? And I think, just aside from just asking a general open-ended question, it'd be like, how do you think you should address these needs, which I think would be too general, but.
Yeah. That's useful. I like that. What would ideal psychosocial care look like for you? I think that's
Oh, I like it. That's really,
okay.
This isn't like a category necessarily, but I think it would also be helpful to include definitions on some of the things, because like, child life is referenced a few times, and pre-cancer, I had no idea what that was until I was in a position that I was seeking it out. Same thing when like infertility is listed, like pre-cancer, I thought that just meant like you were physically infertile. Then I came to know it meant like, going into the fertility world and maybe getting other treatments, like just like a few things, like Indigenous health liaison, people might not know what that is.
Yeah, that's all really helpful. So in the survey and the focus group, the questionnaire and the focus group should be free of jargon, or at least defining any terms that are ambiguous or, technical. That's helpful. Can we go back for a second? So the categories that we had put in the grant originally, just wondering if this might spark any thought. Do I delete them? I might have.
You'd like experience of well-being and distress, psychosocial needs, experience, accessing and using support, preference regarding something.
Yeah, I deleted them, but yes, the summary. Hold on, I pulled them up have them here. Yeah, so the categories as you just described them were demographics and personal attributes. Oh, that's not right.
Sorry.
Here it is. So the first question was, the first category, we said we'd ask some questions about experience of psychosocial well-being and distress. So what has their experience been with that? So we did have some questions we kind of conceived at the beginning of this, right? Like, I think Elisa, we all help with some of them, but I think how does this impact your access to the world? That was a question. Or Elisa, you're asking some of those actual like anxiety and sleep issues in here, like overall health. Okay, so I think we have some for that category. The other category was
Needs.
yeah, exactly.
I think we have lots of that.
Psychosocial needs, which we had some experience accessing and using psychosocial support. So how they access and use information and services. I think we've got some great ones for that.
Yeah.
And then preferences, so regarding optimal components of I think we could do more for that. So we did have that one question, what would ideal psychosocial care look like? What else could we ask to try and get clear on what, because people have ideas probably in their head, but they might not. So how could we elucidate from these focus group attendees?
I wonder if you might ask what people perceive as barriers to accessing psychosocial support.
That's a good one. Yeah. Maybe it's also like, what is your definition of psychosocial support, right? Because some people, like, I think everyone will have very different definitions of that.
Yeah.
I think it's back to the idea of like trauma. Like, again, I thought of the very simple, I wasn't thinking in the broader sense as the Halifax group clarified. So yeah, all of these things need to be defined or interpreted similarly, I guess. Any last minute thoughts? What have we missed?
I think like, are you, something along the lines of like, are you interested in involvement, like involvement opportunities, engagement opportunities? Like, I know for me, like my big piece of coping was to do what I have control over, which is participating in this kind of stuff, like research and
Yeah, that's a good one. And that is a type of support, like psychosocial support. Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
Very
Okay.
group of like-minded people.
Yeah. Anything else that we've missed? Kathy, anything you can think of that you haven't got to share?
No, it was pretty complete list of what I see. I think that the last thing you mentioned about are you interested in participating, that's also addressing how to address your issues. So
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll be in touch with everybody. after this, in case you have any interest in being involved in any way, shape, or form, any engagement is appreciated and welcome, but no pressure. So the next steps will be, we have a summer student who will help do some of the statistical analyses of the results. We'd love anyone who wants to be engaged in that to participate as well. And we're writing a paper, which you're welcome to help us with. And then we'll also be starting to take a look at the surveys for this newer version. So looking at the surveys we've done in Canada and how can we make them better for the larger scale study, and then how can we make this focus group guide really robust and contextualized to the different people. So there's lots of work to be done. So I'll share those opportunities as they come up. Maybe we'll just form a little working group, and people can kind of come and go as it suits you. And if we're funded by our grant, we always include a small line item for compensation for patient partners. So I'll keep you posted on how that all comes together, because that's obviously very important as well. Before we end, because we have a few more minutes, we have to now report back to I think they're gonna call on us to share what we did the past 2 days to the broader group. Who wants to do that? I could, but I would be very happy if someone else wanted to share. Halifax, I hear you guys volunteer.
We thought that Caitlin would be excellent for it.
Bruce.
I think Caitlin will be excellent, but I suggest maybe Kathy, who's been quiet, but maybe has observations that could, I don't know.
Don't feel pressure, Kathy.
I don't think so. I'm sorry.
It's fine, don't worry. Okay, well, if there's no takers, I'll do my best, but.
I can do it if you want. I don't really mind.
Sure, I think it'd be better coming, I'm boring. A different voice would be useful.
So it doesn't have to be very extensive, right?
Not at all, just takeaways, like this is what because people haven't even probably thought of this study, right? So it's just, and I love it, people who are in the other groups who might want to do this to join us. So it's just, for me, I'm always thinking, okay, what is the objective? It's to share with the people, the broader group, what we've been doing, and then sensitize them to it in case they might want to come along with us, that's all. So day one, we looked at some research and thought of some, right?
Yeah.
And then we have this list of 8,000 questions that we now get to categorize and collate, and we can rank them and stuff together later. Any
We
last
thought about research, and day two, we thought about how to improve that research.
Essentially, yeah. And we need your help. Any thoughts that anyone wants to share? I'm sorry if I hope this is what you're expecting. It was very helpful for us, and I hope you enjoyed the co-creating together, but at least you're gonna
No,
say
I was just
something.
gonna say, like, when I mentioned stuff like sleep disturbances, some of those things, I also wonder, like, emotional fatigue,
Yeah,
physical fatigue,
Yeah.
just, I don't know, thinking through just kind
yeah,
of my
that's really helpful.
brain thought, you know.
Yeah. Before I forget. Yeah, thank you. Oh, and then I almost forgot again. Please do this lovely little survey so that I can know how to do a better job next time. Where is it? Oh golly, maybe I should have the survey ready. That would be a good thing to bear with me, folks.
I
Here,
thought of one more thing.
do one more quick survey. Yes, Kathy.
The impact of COVID, because for instance, Sarah's chemo was just stopped in midstream because of COVID for quite a while.
That's a great element we need to consider, and that's terrible that happened.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put that QR code back up. I supposed to write that down before I forgot, because I don't trust myself. Yeah, this is just
Like it would be anecdotal, I realize that, but you know, in focus groups with open-ended questions, people must have an opinion about it, I'm sure.
yeah, absolutely. And some people it might be favorable, shockingly, like since COVID, some of the care discussions, at least at Sick Kids, have went virtual, and that's enabled those to be at more convenient times for patient families and things. So with everything, there's going to be what happened with Sarah is atrocious, and yet there might be some other things that emerge that people see as a positive. I don't know. But yeah, so this is just for I think Juan, you weren't here yet last time, and Mari, but this is just so that we can do better next time. Truly, we're still learning how to co-create with everybody. So I'd love your feedback. And my feelings won't be hurt.
I'm amazed at how much you guys survey us.
Sorry, we just want to learn simply to do better.
It's really good. I mean, and it's a kind of a good lesson for me because I do similar work with communities, right? And like, I always feel so self-conscious about surveying people because it's like, you know, we're all surveyed as a global population, like a million times over, but this is good.
It's also like we do put, it may not look like it, but even these workshops take a lot of like, we have to conceive it and then brainstorm and work on it. It's like,
Exactly.
I'd rather, if I'm not meeting a need, I want to do it better next year then, you know?
Yeah,
Because
it's good. Well, and I think for us, like, I mean, I see, you know, how feedback that I've provided in the past has been incorporated. And so given that I see that and I know that.
I'm glad you
like,
see that.
this
That's
incentivizes me to like
good.
respond.
Keep it coming. Yeah. I mean, the satellite sites came out of feedback, right? Like, this is all, like we hadn't done that for the first while. And then I think it was Dr. Payton and I mean, Dr. Crooks, they were, you know, let's try this. So Dr. Payton was the one who helped bring in the funding to make that even come together from donors. And so we were able to fund it. So it's all the, you guys help derive how this goes.
And also I might be hooked because given that people responded to the QR code during my talk, I was like, oh my God, that's addictive.
I know, I was like,
I agree, I have to say about what you're saying, you know? I want to publish this.
I know, that's hard, right? There's no consent form.
No, I don't want to write another paper. Brenda can write it for me.
Okay, we did another 3 for you.
Okay, well, I think we have 5 minutes left or 4 minutes left. I'll let everyone have a bio break and chat, and then we'll join back to the main group in just a minute. Thanks everybody. I really enjoyed this.